And welcome to Hannity. And this Friday night, this is a Fox News alert. We are awaiting President Trump's arrival at the APEC summit with world leaders in Vietnam. We will bring it to you live when he arrives. But first, Alabama U.S. Senate candidate Judge Roy Moore continues to deny allegations of sexual misconduct that are being levied against him. Now, I interviewed Judge Moore on my radio show about these accusations. We're going to play that for you in its entirety in just a second. But first, the allegations are coming from the Washington Post report that says the most serious claim obviously being made by a woman who is accusing Judge Moore of sexual misconduct. This is back in 1979 when he was 32 and she was 14 years old. Now, 3 other women have also told the Washington Post that Moore pursued relationships with them when they were 16, 17, and 18 years of age. According to the New York Times, Republicans are exploring tonight options to remove Judge Moore's name off the December 12th special election ballot, including by changing the date of that contest to next year. And earlier tonight, Republican Senators Mike Lee, Steve Daines withdrew their endorsements of Judge Moore. The White House is also weighing in, saying that President Trump believes if the allegations against Moore are proven to be true, then the Senate candidate should step aside. As I said last night, these are very serious accusations. And if they are true, Moore should leave that Senate race. Now, everyone agrees a 32-year-old man pursuing a 14-year-old girl is despicable and beyond disgusting. And as I also said, both on radio and TV, it is completely understandable why some women, because of trauma, that they would wait for years before they came forward. That's understandable. But this is 38 years later. Just because the alleged incident happened decades ago doesn't mean it's true or not true. Nobody commenting on this knows the truth but the people involved. Now, with all of that in mind, it's important for the media, politicians, I say this all the time, don't rush to judgment. As we have seen time and time again, they often get it so wrong. On this program, this is not ideological, should never be in any way. Our interest is the truth. We believe Judge Moore has a right to tell his side of the story, which is why I invited him on my radio program earlier today. Here's that interview.
Judge, welcome back to the program. Thanks for being with us.
Nice to be with you.
Yeah, Judge, let's talk about, first, you're now reading it. I know you put out a number of statements, but I think we should address it head on. What do you make of these allegations?
Well, Sean, first let me say this. These allegations are completely false and misleading. But more than that, it hurts me personally because, you know, I'm a father. I have 1 daughter. I have 5 granddaughters, and I have a special concern for protection of young ladies. This is really hard to get on radio and explain this, and these allegations are just completely false.
What do you make specifically? Let's start with what they talked about, that you had struck up a conversation with this young woman who was 14, Lee Kaufman, and her mother says that you offered to watch the girl while the mother went inside for a custody hearing, which they confirmed had actually happened at that time. Do you know Miss Kaufman? Do you know the mother?
I don't know Miss Kaufman from anybody. I've never talked to her, never had any contact with her. Allegations of sexual misconduct with her are completely false. I believe they're politically motivated. I believe they're brought only to stop a very successful campaign, and that's what they're doing. I've never known this woman or anything with regard to the other girls. You understand this is 40 years ago, and after my return from the military, I dated a lot of young ladies. I do recognize, however, the names of 2 of these young ladies, Debbie Wesson and Gloria Thacker, which they have a maiden, that's their maiden name.
Well, let me just give the details. Debbie Wesson Gibson says she was 17 when you spoke to her high school civics class and asked her out on several dates, and it did not progress, her words, beyond kissing, according to the Washington Post. Let's stay on her. Did that happen?
I do not remember speaking to a civics class. I don't remember that. I do not remember when I seem to remember knowing her parents. That they were friends. I can't recall specific dates because that's been 40 years, but I remember her as a good girl. But neither of them have ever stated any inappropriate behavior. She didn't say anything that
Well, she said, but do you remember ever going on a date with her? She said that you asked her out on the first of several dates, but nothing progressed beyond kissing.
I don't remember specific dates. No, I do not. And I don't remember if it was that time or later, but I do not remember that. No.
But you know her, but you never dated her ever. Is that what you're saying?
Know her, but I don't remember going out on dates. I knew her as a friend. If we did go out on dates, then we did, but I do not remember that.
What about Gloria Thacker Deason? Says she was an 18-year-old cheerleader when you began taking her on dates that included bottles of Mateus Rosé wine. She's 18 at the time. The Alabama drinking age at the time is 19. Did that ever happen?
No, because in this county, it's a dry county. We never would have had liquor. If I would never, and I believe this, she said that she believed she was underage. And she, as I recall, she was 19 or older. And that just never happened. I've never provided alcohol, beer, or intoxicating liquors to a minor. That'd be against the law, against anything I would have ever done. And I seem to remember her as a good girl. I seem to remember that I had some sort of knowledge of her parents or her mother, very in particular.
At that time in your life, let me ask you this. You do remember these girls. Would it be unusual for you as a 32-year-old guy to have dated a woman as young as 17? That would be a, 15-year difference, or a girl 18. Do you remember dating girls that young at that time?
Not generally, no. If I did, I'm not going to dispute anything, but I don't remember anything like that.
But you don't specifically remember having any girlfriend that was in her late teens even at that time?
No, I don't remember that, and I don't remember ever dating any girl without the permission of her mother. And I think in her statement, she said that her mother actually encouraged her to go out with me.
Well, actually, there was one, a 14-year-old that was working as a Santa helper when you approached her, and when she was 16, and her mother forbade her. That was the third case. Let me go back to Korfman for a minute here, because this is the issue here. She gives specific instances where the first that you met her at the courthouse, you got her phone number, you talked to her on the phone. And on that, you drove her 30 minutes from her house to the woods and where you lived, and you kissed her. And on a second visit, you took off her shirt, pants, removed your clothes, touched her bra, underpants, and you guided her hand to touch him over your underwear. Now, those are specific charges she's making. And I think, obviously it's about a month away from this election campaign.
Yeah.
Are you staying? Is it your position? None of that ever happened.
It never happened, and I don't even like hearing it because it never happened. And they're doing this a month away, 4 weeks away, after 40 years in public service. I've run 5 successful campaigns, statewide campaigns, 3 in the county. This has never been brought up. It has never been even mentioned. And all of a sudden, 4 weeks out, they're bringing it up. They're bringing it up because it's political. It's a direct attack on this campaign, and it involves a 14-year-old girl, which I would have never had any contact with, nothing with her mother or in a courthouse or anywhere else would I have done that. In fact, her allegations contradict the whole behavior pattern that the 2 of the young ladies even witnessed herself.
You mentioned you'd never go out with any young girl. I assume you meant like when you were 32 at that time of your life. Would you always ask the permission of the parent before you would take a girl out?
Well, I mean, I'm saying that in their statements that they made, these 2 young girls said their mothers actually encouraged them to be friends with me. And, that's what they said. I don't remember. I wasn't privy to their conversation, but obviously we never had any sexual activity. There was never anything like that, and the behavior was altogether appropriate, according to them. You
have pretty much been convicted in the court of public opinion. I mean, I'm looking at there are Republican senators, like John McCain is out there and he's very vocal and he's been out there saying that from his position that he said the allegations against Roy Moore are deeply disturbing and disqualifying. He should immediately step aside and allow the people of Alabama to elect a candidate they can be proud of. And Mitt Romney said you're innocent until proven guilty is only for criminal convictions, not elections, he goes on to say, and seemingly suggesting just because of the allegation you should step aside. How do you respond to them?
Well, if you step aside for any allegation, then you might as well not run, because when you run, you're going to get allegations. And first, I would tell these individuals they wouldn't make good judges, they wouldn't make good people in the judicial system, because you are innocent until proven guilty. In this case, this woman has waited over 40 years to bring a complaint 4 weeks out of an election. It's obvious to the casual observer that something's up. We're also doing an investigation, and we have some evidence of some collusion here, but we're not ready to put that to the public just yet.
So you are trying to prove your innocence, in other words.
Well, just like you said, they're doing it to defeat the Senate campaign. They're bringing something. They're trying to mix something up from other girls that never said anything about sexual impropriety, and they're all labeling it on this 14-year-old, and I had nothing to do with this. This is a completely manufactured story meant to defrock this campaigh. They're 11 points behind. They don't like my acknowledgement that there is a God, and that we've refused to debate them because they're very liberal stance on transgenderism and transgenderism in the military and in bathrooms. They're desperate, Sean. They're simply.
Well, let me ask a general question.
Yes.
Let's take you out of this for a second. If any Senate candidate who was 32 at the time had done this to a 14-year-old girl, to me, it's disgusting. To me, it would be despicable. To me, that is a predator. Would you agree with me? No such person who ever does that should ever be in the United States Senate?
Of course. Nobody that abuses a 14-year-old at age 32 or age 17, it doesn't matter. If you abuse a 14-year-old, you shouldn't be a Senate candidate. I agree with that. But I did not do that.
Let's go back to one more question, because I didn't understand this. If you're 32 and you do date, again, this is different, 17 or 18-year-old, that's a pretty big gap for a pretty young girl. Is that something you did when you were dating? I'm not talking about the 14-year-old and that specific allegation. Would it be normal behavior back in those days for you to date a girl that's 17 or 18?
No, not normal.
If my daughter is 17, my daughter's 16 years old. If she's 17 or 18, I don't want her dating a 32-year-old.
I wouldn't either.
And you can say unequivocally you never dated anybody that was in their late teens like that when you were 32?
It would have been out of my customary behavior. That's right.
In other words, you don't recall ever dating any girl that young when you were that old?
I've said no.
And you think that's inappropriate, too? That's what you're saying?
Inappropriate, yes.
Let me ask you about your general feelings, because, a lot of things come up during elections. This is not my first rodeo, Judge, and I've covered a lot of big topics over the years, and I know a lot of people rush to judgment, and in my life, I try not to do that. And this is such a serious allegation. It's such a significant point in this race. My only goal is not ideological here. My goal is to get to truth. And Richard Jewell, I was in Atlanta, and then the article comes out, well, he fits the profile of the lone bomber because he lives with his mother. We saw what happened in the Duke lacrosse case. Those 3 kids were falsely accused. We saw that the whole nation and the president was wrong on issues like Ferguson, Missouri, hands up, don't shoot, never happened. George Zimmerman was found not guilty by a jury of his peers. Darren Wilson was exonerated by a grand jury because of eyewitnesses that saw the Michael Brown incident. Then you have the case of Freddie Gray. Everybody thought those policemen did horrible things, and they were all not guilty. There was no evidence on any of those cases. So there are instances when things are said wrong. Clarence Thomas, I would argue, is a case. Herman Cain is a case. What do you want to tell people, and I'll just give you the microphone, about how they should view the Washington Post, these people making these charges, and your denial? How should people see it?
Well, I think they should see it as it really is, and that's 40 years I've been in the public eye. I've been serving as a deputy prosecutor. I've been a judge. I've been a chief justice twice. I've run a foundation for moral law. And now, after 40 years, 4 weeks out of an election, not even mentioned in the primary, they bring charges and try to back them up with other things that sound bad. But then they allege things that are completely untrue. I never knew this woman. I never met this woman. And these charges are politically motivated, and they're there to do exactly what they're doing. The Democrat is 11 points behind. He's very liberal. They don't want to talk about his record. They don't want to talk about his inexperience. They want to diffuse this just like they diffused President Trump's agenda by bringing up the Russian deal. They're bringing up something to detract from this campaign, and they know what they're doing, and they've got me, obviously, on the radio hearing things about a sexual encounter that never happened. I would put you in the same position. You would feel just like me. You'd be angry. You'd be very angry. And that's exactly the position I'm in. This never happened. They know it never happened, and obviously, you don't wait 40 years to bring out something like this. There are going to come out facts. There will be facts to show in this situation that this was the Democrat and maybe even the established Republican effort to undermine this campaign because they don't want to hear the truth in Washington, and they don't want to hear the truth about God and about the Constitution.
Last thought on the establishment Republicans. You think they're partly involved in this?
Well, if they're not involved in the implementation of it, they're sure backing away very quickly.
And then what about those that don't give you the presumption of innocence? What do you say to them?
That's what I'm talking about. They're not even giving me the presumption of innocence. They're saying I should resign because the Washington Post, who brought these charges against the president, or allegations about the Russian involvement, the Washington Post has attacked my foundation, they've attacked my wife, and now they're attacking me personally on a sexual matter. I don't know what's coming next, but I'm sure that in the next 4 weeks, they're going to come out with another article because they've got an agenda and they're fulfilling their agenda right as we speak.
All right, joining us now with reaction, Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett, Fox News correspondent at large Geraldo Rivera, trial attorney Rebecca Rose Woodland. I think this, if you look at all the cases where people in our industry, especially Geraldo, have been wrong, and this rush to judgment on high-profile cases. I went through last night the lesson I learned in Atlanta, Richard Jewell, and then Duke Lacrosse, and then so many were wrong. The professors there were wrong, and Ferguson, and Trayvon Martin, and Baltimore, and Freddie Gray, and nobody in the media thought the president would win. We have to balance serious allegations here with also the presumption of innocence, don't we? How do you do that?
Well, I think that, with all due respect, you're burying the lead. The lead is that was a smart, tough, deeply revealing interview. What are we talking about here? We're talking about a he said, she said. So the credibility of the parties is the most relevant thing you can think of. I pictured Judge Roy Moore just then sitting in the witness chair and you asking him those questions and hearing his denials, his non-denial denials, his fumfering and
what specific question though?
When you asked him, did he date these young women or these girls, and he said, I think I
asked the general question.
No, generally not. No, generally not. So that means that there are exceptions to your general rule. I thought, Sean, you ended Roy Moore's, and you did not intend this. But I'm speaking now as I think a fair arbiter with that telling interview, asking every question that everybody listening had, you ended his candidacy, and I would urge Republicans to postpone the special election.
Vladimir Putin arriving at the APEC summit. This is in Vietnam. The president is expected momentarily. When he gets there, we'll bring that to you, Rebecca.
You know, I'm going to continue Geraldo's thoughts. The credibility of the women who came forward. He's claiming this is fake news. Well, if it's fake news, why don't we look at the women? We have 4 women who don't know each other, 4 women who never met each other, one of whom admits to being a long-standing Republican. Where would they come up with this story? They would be pushed then to come up with a story a month before the election. It's really,
but it's happened.
The credibility.
Listen, I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Yes.
I watched Herman Cain's character get assassinated, and I've known this man a long time. What happened to Clarence Thomas was, he said at the time, a high-tech lynching on the verge of him becoming a Supreme Court justice. All of these, last-minute allegations, do they not have to be suspect? In other words, I'm only saying I want the truth. And I don't know the truth tonight.
I agree, except for the fact that these women didn't come forward. The Washington Post reporter found them after he started
Well, you believe in the Washington Post. I'm not exactly the biggest fan.
I also believe that if Anita Hill had come forward today, and if Clarence Thomas was being confirmed today, he would never be on the high court. These are much different times than the Clarence Thomas confirmation.
I think Clarence Thomas was his own best witness and gave one of the most powerful defenses of an individual. Let me bring Greg in. I'm not trying to. We have plenty of time tonight. Greg.
Look, cross-examination is the engine of truth, and your interview today was a fine cross-examination of Roy Moore. I think you missed your calling. You should have been a lawyer. I found his answers to be unconvincing and implausible, his entire story to be, in a word, unbelievable, which means he's lying. He's not telling the truth, and on that basis, I think he should step aside. Look, you caught him in a glaring contradiction. You asked him, as a 32-year-old man, did you date 17 and 18-year-olds? He said, quote, if I did, I'm not going to dispute anything. Later, when you asked him the second time, he said, if I did, I don't remember. You asked him a third time, and he said, absolutely not. Now, that is at best an inconsistency, at worst a contradiction. And jurors are told there's a standard jury instruction. The judge reads it to them. If you find that a witness is lying in one part of their story, you may conclude the witness is lying about everything. And that's how I felt about Judge Roy Moore today. I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt because of the source of this information, the Washington Post, which endorsed his opponent,
can I ask you
and
all
because
a
of
quick
the
exit
age
question?
of these. Pardon me?
What if he, in the interview, as I was asking him, I know it was, listen, it was not as hard as people think. I went through all the facts of the case and gave him a chance to answer. I wanted to be fair, but to also, what if, in fact, he was just inarticulate and it still wasn't true? Throwing it out, devil's advocate.
If he was inarticulate, what wasn't true? That 4
In other words, that 38
women?
years ago, when he was 32 years old, he was not a predator. This is such a serious charge, and you see, no one can say here definitively. And I'm watching the media in the court of public opinion. They've already convicted him. He's out, but they did that yesterday, before this interview took place.
Right, I agree that these are allegations, but when you put it together, Sean, 4 women who don't know each other, a 14-year-old girl, these women are going to destroy their lives then?
All right, we got to take a break. We'll have more on my exclusive interview with Judge Roy Moore coming up. Plus, we are awaiting, as you can see on the side of your screen here, President Trump will be arriving at the APEC summit that is in Vietnam with other world leaders. Busy breaking news night tonight on Hannity. This is a Fox News alert moments ago. President Trump arriving at the APEC summit. This is in Vietnam. Also tonight, we just showed you my exclusive interview with Judge Roy Moore, who was accused of sexual misconduct. And we have been telling you, the media has been quick to convict Judge Moore before ever even hearing this interview or his side of the story. We continue, by the way. Watch this first. Well, no, hang on. We'll go to Greg Jarrett, who's with us. Also, Geraldo Rivera. Rebecca Rose Woodland is with us. I want to go back again because I think we all have an obligation to get things right when there's serious charges. Again, there's the president of the APEC summit. Richard Jewell, when I was in Atlanta, everybody had this guy. He fit the profile of the lone bomber. Why? Because he lived with his mother. You look at the case, the Duke lacrosse case, 88 professors take out a full-page advertisement in the school newspaper. Ferguson, there are people that still believe the lie, hands up, don't shoot. That never happened. Trayvon Martin, look at what the president, I could have been Trayvon. You know, it could have been my son. That turned out when the evidence was presented before a jury and an eyewitness that placed Trayvon on top of George Zimmerman, grounding and pounding his head into cement. I'm just giving you examples. Or the Freddie Gray case. Everybody was convinced those policemen were going to jail. Everyone. Then you have a media that got it so wrong on Trump, it was contempt that they were showing every night. Donald Trump running. And he wins the presidency. They were wrong there. A lot of people wouldn't vet Obama. They were wrong there. For me, in my own personal life, what I learned from these experiences is that a rush to judgment is very, very dangerous. And that's why I sincerely urge caution among everybody. You got a bigger piece of the puzzle because this was his first interview and only interview. Does that give you pause? Should we all pause and wait for more information?
I think we can pause and wait for more information.
But you made up your mind.
But I do think
But you made up your mind. I could tell.
Well, because I heard the interview. Why doesn't he come on? Why don't we invite him
Well, he was on today. I mean, in fairness.
That's true. That he was on. He was on your radio show, but something didn't seem genuine. Something didn't seem real to me. Not to me. And when I look at 4 women, it's very hard for me to believe 4 independent women.
Is it 4 women? There was a hesitation. Mm-hmm. No doubt about it, and Greg was right. Greg, by the way, has a photographic memory. I don't. And Greg Giraldo went back, and he said, this is how he answered the question about the appropriateness of a 17-year-old girl. But it doesn't, would that convict you? And
see, to me, I go back, I'm just...
I know you don't like it personally. I want you to be a lawyer.
I want this to be a little bit about you and me. We come from different parts of the political spectrum. You believed Bill Clinton guilty about all those charges. I believed him innocent. You believed Donald Trump innocent, and many, many people believed him guilty after the Access Hollywood tapes. We have a tendency to want, particularly in this charged political environment, to believe the people who think like we do philosophically and politically, and to disbelieve our political opponents. What was brilliant about this interview was that you and Roy Moore largely, I mean, admit it, you largely agree on the great philosophical issues of the day. He's a little more to the right of you, but generally speaking, you're in the same milieu. Yet you asked him in explicit detail about this charge and this charge and this charge, and then you said, as the parent of a daughter, I find this conduct disgusting. Just like everybody watching tonight finds that conduct disgusting. That was so riveting and so powerful in the impact it had on Judge Roy Moore that I really do believe that today you ended his effective political career.
But even he, I got to be fair to Greg, but even he, Greg, when asked if anyone at 32 had done this, was a predator to a 14-year-old girl, right, would that disqualify them to be a senator? He said yes.
He did, and there are other reasons he should disqualify himself. And I'm not rushing to judgment on Roy Moore. I've followed his career closely for years. I have long said that this is a man who has a record of lawlessness. He pretends to respect the law, but he has nothing but contempt for it. How do we know? Because he has repeatedly defied federal court orders and rulings on U.S. constitutional matters. He even rejected the Supreme Court decision on same-sex marriage and sought to undermine it with his own orders. He is not above the 9 justices sitting on the U.S. Supreme Court, though he seems to think so. And on that basis, I have said before the primary, it would be trouble to nominate this man because he is toxic, and he will be so in the U.S. Senate.
All right, we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we'll show you The media's rushed to judgment way before this interview even. And is that a problem? We'll ask that question. Then we have John Bolton, Sebastian Gorka. As you can see, the president is in Vietnam at the APEC summit. We'll cover that, continue to cover that live. If the president speaks, we'll bring that to you. Welcome back to Hannity. This is a Fox News alert. President Trump is in Vietnam at this hour at the APEC summit. Also tonight, more reaction to my exclusive interview with Judge Roy Moore, who's been accused of sexual misconduct. Now, we've got a problem in this country, and that's the media. So many quick to attack, convict, rush to judgment. That's even before this interview with Judge Moore. Well, let's watch this.
Some of these right-wing media defenders, I don't know how they can possibly sleep at night, and I wonder if they're going to look back years from now and regret some of the things they're saying. These commentators, the Steve Bannons, the Sean Hannitys, they'd rather talk about the media than the alleged molestation. That's a much more convenient topic for them, but I think everybody sees through it.
You saw on Fox News, he had a lot of defenders. So this is going to test two things. One, sort of the depths and depravity of conservative media outlets that defend someone like Roy Moore, who is now known to be a pedophile.
If you know a 14-year-old, picture that, and now visually picture this 32-year-old slimebag attorney actually calling up to her and bring her, just play that movie out in your head.
A woman says Roy Moore initiated a sexual encounter with her when she was 14 and he was 32. For those keeping track, that is an age difference of, it doesn't matter, she was 14.
All right, as we continue with Greg Jarrett, Geraldo Rivera, Rebecca Rose Woodland is with us. All right, let me go back to Greg first, and we'll start with that. There have been so many instances that the media is wrong. You know, I asked those people in the media, and I can play tapes of them on Duke Lacrosse. I can play tapes of them believing hands up, don't shoot. I can play tapes of them, you know, convicting George Zimmerman before he had a trial. We can go back and again. And my question is, how do you sleep at night if you just recklessly go out there and don't know the truth and haven't heard every side, and you turn out to be wrong? You know, there's 10 commandments, Greg. The other 9 we know that are broken on a daily basis by human beings. I assume the one about false witness is also broken a lot. I'm not saying in this case, but I'm saying we've got to be careful.
Look, the media narrative is that Donald Trump is the villain, Hillary Clinton is an innocent victim, and Robert Mueller, the special counsel, is a hero. And they stick to that narrative each and every day. I was watching another network the other day, a competing network, and, you know, the anchor was saying, isn't this meeting with Russia collusion? As if it's illegal. These anchors and reporters actually never bother to look up the law. There is no such thing as collusion as a crime except in antitrust law. But they imply that having a conversation with a Russian is somehow a crime. It is not. Yeah. Paying a Russian for information in a dossier, that would be a crime under the Federal Election Campaign Act.
Let me talk with you, Geraldo, about selective moral outrage. You were one of Bill Clinton's, probably the strongest voice at the time defending him during impeachment.
That's why you hated me.
No, I didn't hate you. I did not.
You had a bullseye in your office. This is the literal fact.
That's not true.
With my face on it, that he threw darts.
We were competing at the same hour at the time. Believe me, I remember.
It was the bullseye.
All right. But I spent time, I interviewed Paula Jones. I interviewed Kathleen Willey. I had one of 2 interviews at the time with Juanita Broderick. And then let's look at this, because the Democratic Party, and I want to talk about this double standard, you know, they excused all that behavior. They talked about dragging dollars through trailer parks about some of these women, and they started a smear, you know, campaign against Monica Lewinsky at the time, Clinton surrogates. And then Hillary Clinton, she took money from countries that abuse women, kill gays and lesbians, and persecute Christians and Jews. So I watch Democrats, okay, they can be all outraged now, and they can believe everything they want to believe, but this isn't out of principle. This is out of politics. This is out of their hope that the Republicans implode and that they can steal the Alabama Senate seat. This is opportunity for them, because the Democratic Party has a reckoning that they're going to have to go through, because he went with a 22-year-old girl and he's the president of the United States.
In the Oval Office.
In the Oval Office.
I think that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. That's why I believe there has to be some standards. Now, I've heard commentator after commentator today all day long on ours and other networks, particularly on the other networks, suggesting that the senators who are saying that this man cannot be a viable candidate if these charges are true. Everybody kept putting the caveat, the little tail. He can't, if these charges are true. He can't ever be if these charges are true. So how do you know if these charges are true, particularly if you have a case that's old like this? So that's why I want to go back to what I said last night. You need some kind of standards. The charge should be reasonably contemporaneous. Now, I'm not saying there should be a rigid statute of limitations, but it should be like a decade, 2 decades. I mean, the reason there's a statute of limitations is that people's memories fade. They become unreliable.
Ask you a tough question?
But you need some kind of corroboration.
Yeah.
You need some kind. In this case, the corroboration exists. What is the contemporaneous corroboration? This 14-year-old girl, purportedly, according to the Washington Post, told 2 of her girlfriends what happened.
Here's the tough question.
In real time.
Do you think Bill Clinton, in retrospect, was a predator?
That is a very tough question. And you know, I still have affection for him.
You suspect he might. Let me help you out. You suspect he might be.
I suspect that many of these charges are true. I suspect they're true. And I think that he was definitely a philanderer.
And maybe a predator?
Predation is different. Predation has to do with how the victim or the other person is.
Quick, last 20 seconds, Rebecca.
Look, Sean, I've been on your show. We handled Duke great. We've handled Trayvon.
By the way, we were right on Duke.
We were right. We were right from the beginning.
Duke.
My instinct was...
Same was mine.
Right. I was on every night with you. In this, I have to tell you, Mike, I don't think they're lying.
Does he deserve the presumption of innocence?
Of course he does. And I don't denounce that. But I do think that these girls do not have a reason. They don't have a reason to lie.
Is it problematic when you wait 38 years? And by the way, I can understand people not wanting to for reasons that they're embarrassed or
of course,
they've been traumatized, and it's horrible.
14.
If you talk about
how
it.
embarrassing for her at 14. I don't know that she'd be so comfortable coming out and at any time until she was
I want to see what else comes out in the days ahead. I will keep an open mind, and I don't believe in rushing to judgment. I think it's very dangerous.
Do you believe the election should be postponed?
I don't know how they can do that legally yet, but they're talking about it. But I think it's for the fairness of the people of Alabama. I think till we get to the facts and the truth and sort through all this, it probably would be a good idea. I believe
the alternative is the Democrat will win.
All right, when we come back, thank you all. Appreciate it. All right, the president now is just arrived at the APEC summit. He's in Vietnam. We'll have full coverage with Sebastian Gorka, John Bolton. If the president speaks, we'll cover that straight ahead. And welcome back to Hannity. This is a Fox News alert. President Trump arriving just moments ago at the APEC summit in Vietnam. Now, it's part of this very important Asian trip, and so little coverage in the media. Joining us now, Fox News national security strategist Sebastian Gorka and former U.S. ambassador to the UN, Fox News contributor John Bolton. You know, so I had you both before he gave that speech in South Korea, which I thought was 30 miles from the DMZ, Sebastian. I thought one of his finest, and I thought it reestablished America as the world power in that arena, like he did when he was in the Middle East, and almost his finest moments and so little coverage. This was an important moment for him, and this has been an important trip so far.
Absolutely, Sean, but we've seen this all before. Every trip he's had has knocked it out of the ballpark, whether it's that incredible speech he gave in Warsaw about the Judeo-Christian values that our Western civilization in America is built upon, whether it was going into the heart of the Islamic world, into Riyadh, and really talking tough love to all those Arab leaders about how they have to take responsibility for the extremists and the terrorists in their communities, or whether it's standing sitting just miles from the DMZ and talking about the evil that is the North Korean Stalinist regime. Every trip has been incredible, and it's just not interesting to the mainstream media, just as the domestic achievements aren't interesting either, whether it's the lowest unemployment in 17 years, the 25% increase in the stock market. There's reality, and then there's what the mainstream media or the fake news industrial complex would not have you pay attention to.
Yeah. Let me get your take on the entirety of the trip and the importance of this trip, Ambassador Bolton. I also think the particular part where he's building and forging this relationship with China is so key, especially in dealing with the North Korean crisis, and it is a crisis.
Well, the big event on the trip, although obviously it's not over, was the meeting with Xi Jinping and the discussions they had, and in particular on North Korea. And as of now, we don't know how that went. There was very little comment on it, just generalizations about what was covered. So we don't know whether Xi Jinping resisted a tough line I'm sure the president took, said, look, I'm just not going to do that, or whether possibly there's been some movement in our direction that neither the Chinese nor the White House think is appropriate to discuss publicly, which wouldn't be surprising. But for now, I think you'd have to say that that remains a big question mark. I think. Plus, I thought the speech was very Reagan-esque, very tough, very clear. But we still need to see what happens with the Chinese. And I must say, it's going to be interesting to see just exactly what kind of meeting he has with Vladimir Putin in Vietnam. I don't know why the White House has been equivocal on this. I think he should sit down with Putin. I think he's got a lot to talk to him about, and I wouldn't miss the opportunity.
The only thing they seem to want to cover, Dr. Gorka, is, oh, there's the president. He's saying hello to Vladimir Putin. Russia, Russia, Russia. We've had a year of these allegations, and last Sunday, Dianne Feinstein said, no evidence of collusion again. Smoke, but no fire again, which has been pretty much the refrain for the last year.
Yeah, it's stunning that the Democrats or the media didn't have a problem when Kennedy met with Khrushchev or when any other president met with a premier of the Soviet Union or the Russian Federation. It's just double standards. If the left didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have any standards at all. So the fact is, Russia is a nuclear power. It is one of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. It is right that the president meet with Vladimir Putin and talk to him as tough as he talks to Xi Jinping behind closed doors. This is geopolitics, Sean. You meet with other heads of state, whether they're good guys or not.
Quick comment, Ambassador.
No, I think that's exactly right. And so we'll see what happens with the Putin meeting.
Okay, thank you. One last question. I do have a little more time. Dr. Gorka, what are your thoughts on this issue of Judge Moore, especially in light of my interview tonight?
Look, I think that was a very important interview. I will say one thing, having met Judge Moore, he's not a slick, rhino, political, dyed-in-the-wool operator. So I think, his media appearances have to be judged in the light of his background, that he's not somebody who's lived in the swamp for 30 years. But at the end of the day, the truth has to come out. If anything inappropriate happened, it should be investigated. But again, it's the presumption of innocence.
Presumption of innocence. Don't rush to judgment. The media has been so wrong so often. We're just going to pursue the truth here. That's our promise. More Hannity straight ahead. All right, welcome back to Hannity. All right, before we go, first, I want to say thank you. 2 weeks ago, this night, we launched a faith-based film. I'm the executive producer. We had no Hollywood studio. We had no outside help. We were independent. And it's become the biggest breakout hit, a huge success. Now, we started on 370 theaters around. We're now on over 800. And the film is one of the breakout films of the year. If you haven't seen it yet, the good news is we're in so many more locations. I hope you'll take your family this weekend. It's at Hannity.com, and it will touch your mind, your heart, your emotions, your soul. Here's a quick look at the trailer.
Doc, he is your God, and he's holding out his hand to you. All you got to do now is take it. Jesus gets whacked, right?
I've never exactly heard it put that way, but yeah.
Follow me here. This ain't brain surgery.
Do you believe that God hears?
God always answers prayers. Sometimes we just don't understand the answers.
This better be good.
That's what I said. I want to lose you.
I promise an emotional roller coaster, bring tissues, and we don't insult conservative or Christian values. It's so different than the formulaic Hollywood message of sex, violence, and, oh, Jennifer Aniston fall in love. Hannity.com for locations nearest you. Thanks for being with us. Have a great weekend. Laura's next. We'll see you back here on Monday.